Welcome to Nonsense, Season 3, Episode 33, our big story and our second show of the week. I'm Jeff Parker.
I'm Stittle.
This time we're looking at Ghost in the Sky, how the B-2 redefined air power. Up next.
Where else would you find ghosts?
Hey, last week we flew the B-2 stealth bombers to Iran. I remember when this thing was coming out, and it felt like it was when I was almost still a kid.
Sure.
I mean, it was a long, long time ago.
To my knowledge, we didn't fly it. I'm pretty sure you and I can barely operate an automobile.
We, the U.S. So you helped pay for it. I have news for you.
That's true. I like the earmark. I put on my taxes. I go, for B-2 only. That's what I put next to the final amount.
Why was this the plane of choice for this mission? And more importantly, why even a plane and not a drone? It seems like a drone could have delivered
Good question.
a big payload. Maybe not this big of a payload.
The payload, these bunker buster bombs are very, very not small.
Mm-hmm.
They're massive, right? They're 30,000 pounds each. It's a school bus.
Yeah.
And they're like 40 feet long, something like that, or 3 feet round. They're gigantic.
They're big.
They're massive. You're not going to send that over with a drone. There's no way. More importantly, the B-2s are incredible because they can take off with their munitions from Missouri, where they all live, and fly literally anywhere on the planet. Do what they need to, well, as long as it's not raining. If it's raining, it gets complicated. But if it's not raining, they can fly. Rain is the enemy of the B-2. We've spent billions of dollars.
It's amazing.
And at no point in the design process, they're like, what about rain? Like, shut up, Carl. These don't go where it rains.
We didn't want to put a windshield wiper on it?
Easy. You're going to get recruited by the DOD if you keep talking like that. No. So the B-2s can take off from Missouri, go literally anywhere in the world, do what they need to do, typically dropping munitions, and then come back and land in Missouri and never land anywhere else.
I am fascinated by this plane. And
it's really an incredible vehicle.
And you know more than I do, so I'm going to ask you lots of questions, and hopefully you can tell me what's going on.
All right.
The unseen hammer, the silent dominance of the B-2 bomber. Let's go.
I'm very silent if we're talking about it.
Last week's Operation Midnight Hammer in Iran, a top-secret mission reportedly involving 7 B-2 Spirit stealth bombers delivering massive bunker buster bombs, has once again pushed this incredible aircraft into the spotlight. This audacious strike against Iran's concrete-fortified nuclear facilities was the largest B-2 mission in history. It forces us to marvel anew at Spirit's unmatched stealth and enduring strategic value. The operation highlights how such a technologically mature warplane continues to dominate the modern battlefield.
There's not a lot that I've come to learn in my relatively brief life, but whenever somebody puts the word mature as an adjective in front of the next thing, that's never good.
Yeah.
When they're like, oh, you're one of those mature software developers, and I'm like, what the hell did you just call me? I don't know. That doesn't sound like a compliment.
I'm seasoned.
I'm seasoned. Yes, exactly. It's a well-versed technological platform.
As our resident aviation geek, CJ is fairly up to speed on such things, at least as much as they allow civilians to be. And as our resident guy who knows next to nothing, I have questions, and I also have one request for you, CJ. Try not to lose me.
Okay, small words.
As my kid always says, explain it like I'm 5.
I love that. I wasn't planning on doing this, explain it like I'm 5. Also, I have an odd barometer because my 5-year-old
is ridiculously smart.
Doesn't accept explain it like I'm 5.
You do.
I give him explain it like I'm 5, and he like gives me a face. He's like, stop patronizing me. And I'm just like, okay.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm sorry.
You do have crazy smart children. Listen, back up. I need a primer on the B-2.
Sure.
It was created in the 1990s, and I don't know, why did we need this thing? What was...
Before that, really.
Okay, tell me the backstory. Why did we need this thing? What was the purpose of it?
So, okay, great question. We, as you know, as Americans, we've been bombing for decades, right? It's basically our superpower. Pardon the pun.
It's what we do. It's who we are.
It's what we do. Like everything else we do is to make money so that we can make more bombs to bomb it out anybody that's not doing what we want them to do. So we had the B-52, which, just to be clear here, first flew in 1952. This is a plane that is still in service in form today even.
Is that where the name comes from?
The B-52?
B-52?
Oh, good question. I don't know.
Because it first flew in 52?
I don't think that was the plan they took back then.
The B stands for bomber, right?
No, the B stands for bitchin'.
Okay.
I'm assuming it stands for bomber, yes. So the B-52 been around for a hot minute. Its replacement was supposed to be the B-1, which was going to be built by Rockwell. So this is sort of first envisioned in the 60s, and that was a bomber that they wanted to do Mach 2, which was sort of the speed of the B-58, which was a sort of short-lived, not very widely known plane, but the payload of a B-52. So they basically said, let's take the fast, light-ish bomber that we have, the B-58, and let's combine it with a payload of the B-52.
Okay, stop. Had no one explained to them number iteration? Because it seems odd going from 52 to 58 to 1.
We could do an entire show. We could do a whole month of shows on number iteration. Like, I mean, Porsche, another great example. They started with the 911, and you're like, okay, you got a ways to go. And then they just started jumping around like crazy, and they're literally out of numbers now. And they're just like, well, we'll call it the 992, I guess. Like, wait, what?
They're a private company. This is the United States. They have lots of people to think about this.
Sure. I mean, I think there's actually a whole bunch of different issues at Bay here. It's like, for each one of these that gets actually made, how many other planes were spec'd or postulated that never came? So who knows? It's a worthwhile topic, but in this particular case, they were rolling the clock back to the B-1. The B-1 was supposed to be the replacement for the B-52. So that was sort of postulated in the 60s. They'd already awarded contracts, done a bunch of work on this. They canceled it in 1977.
Okay.
The reasons are not entirely clear.
Because Mach 2 was hard to do.
Mach 2 is certainly hard to do, especially with a large payload. However, you had cruise missiles that could fly the same basic speed and distance. So those had come to market or come to fruition then. And then you had early work on the B-2 stealth bomber, which was moving along pretty well. So I think the thought was, it's the late 70s. We're not exactly rolling in money. Let's go ahead and cancel the B-1. We're going to the B-2 program stood up here pretty soon.
Let's go right to its sequel.
And you got these cruise missiles. So the B-1 ended up being restarted under Reagan in 81. A large part of that was because then they had delays in the B-2 program. So they brought the B-1 back. Yeah. Now, the B-1 that was made was not the B-1 that was postulated initially. The initial B-1 was the B-1A. That was altered. They reduced the speed from Mach 2 to Mach 1.25 at high altitude, and then below the sound barrier, Mach 0.92 at lower altitude. But the point is, they made a lighter version lighter in functionality of the B-1A. They called that the B-1B. They started delivering that in 85. I think they were all delivered by 88.
And how many of those got delivered?
I think about 100. I think about 100 of those delivered. So we made a bunch of them.
Okay.
Now, the design targets for it, yes, going fast, big payload, but not nearly as, audacious or grandiose as the B-2. The B-2, long-range, heavy stealth bomber, right? This was developed by Northrop Grumman.
No fuselage, no tail of any sort.
No fuselage.
It's just a wing. It's a flying wing.
Really no nothing, which is what's bananas about this. It's just a wing with no, and I'll talk a bit more about this, but there's so many things on an aircraft that are really hard to just remove. There's no engines that are externally mounted on the B-2. They're all inside the wing. There's just a wing. As you mentioned, there's no fuselage. You don't want an engine strung outside of an aircraft, especially if you want to be sort of radar invisible.
Sure.
Because what's on an engine, right? You've got a turbofan spinning around. Those metal blades are just giant radar. What's the word?
Notifiers.
Yeah. So you're bouncing radar, and all it's doing is throwing radar back so that you get a huge signature off it. So they're like, let's just put it inside the plane. And then all of the challenges that come with that. It's really incredible. Now, the B-2 kind of feel like maybe they put a little too much into the bag. Compared to the B-1, the B-1B, the one that we ended up making and delivering in the 80s, the B-2 has about a 6,000 nautical mile range without refueling.
Yeah.
The B-1B is about 5,100 nautical miles when empty, 4,100 nautical miles when it's loaded up with about halfway, about 37,000 pounds of weapons.
Sure.
Goes a lot slower. The B-2 tops out at about 0.95, Mach 0.95, just below the sound barrier. B-1B can go through the sound barrier.
Kind of seems like if you're trying to be stealthy, breaking the sound barrier is not really going to keep you hidden.
Yeah.
We're kind of going to wonder, where'd that boom come from?
Well, I think you also go, well, why do you want to go fast, right? You want to go fast so that you can usually get in and get out pretty quick. If you're also invisible, I think it gives you a similar sort of non-detectability. The SR-71, which is arguably the first kind of stealth plane, I really put that into quotes, it got its stealth because it could just outrun pretty much everything. When it was initially made, I don't think there was anything surface to air that could take it out. There certainly were no other planes. And then later, as surface to air missiles got better, it would have a harder time outrunning it, but that thing could fly at 80,000 feet. So it could fly a whole flight ceiling above the flight ceiling of a regular aircraft.
That's amazing. And
then the B-2, they wanted it to be able, they really wanted it as a stealth ability to drop anything. They built it so they could put pretty much anything into the payload, anywhere from 500 pound sort of GPS guided bombs all the way up to the two 30,000 pound bunker busters that we saw dropped last week.
How many bunker busters can it carry?
Two of the big ones. Those things are 30,000 pounds. There's 2 bays on the B-2, one in each bay. That's it. But it can carry 500 pound bombs.
Yeah, it's a lot.
That's a lot of bombs. The B-2 is what I will call the only acknowledged in-service aircraft that can carry large air-to-surface weapons in a stealth configuration. The only one.
Nothing else before it really has been designed to be stealth like this.
No, that was the point.
Was it created because we knew that we had these tech advances where we could make something that was stealth, or did we have to create the tech advances in order to make it?
Of course.
We now have this really nice paint we can put on things and it makes them stealth. We should make a plane out of that. Or was it the reverse where we said, it'd be great if we could have some sort of thing that would help us be stealth?
Great question. The answer is yes. It is absolutely yes to both of
Okay.
those. You were standing on the shoulders of giants in terms of tech because you had a bunch of things that we had sort of figured out beforehand. So you had radar absorbing materials. We had already sort of started to work on that and figure that out. You had CAD coming to fruition, computer aided design, which made modeling these things for something that you could actually fly, because it turns out that's important if you're an aircraft.
Sure.
And then also have a very small radar cross section so that it doesn't show up on radar. That was very hard to do on a board. When you had computer aided design, this gets a lot easier. And then you've got composite materials that are getting better, and sensors are getting smaller. Communication systems between systems on a aircraft are getting smaller. All of that stuff is the tailwind that we got to ride.
Yeah.
But then there was a whole bunch of stuff that we just hadn't figured out. So like the actual, not the stealth materials, but the stealth design of the plane, we had not done before. The flying wing had not been done successfully. There were some earlier flying wing designs, but not, to my knowledge, at the speeds and the payloads that we're talking about here.
Right.
You had to think about like thermal signature. So one of the ways you can give away a plane is by its thermal signature. So these engines get super hot. You've got to cool that down. They had to make things like new adhesives and paints.
Sure.
We didn't have those before. So you start with the design criteria, and then you just get a bunch of really smart people and you go, well, we're going to figure it out.
How do we do this? How do we do this?
So truly the answer is both. And then I think probably one of the best things you had to bring the B-2 to fruition was you had this big, scary, unknown opponent in the Soviet Union.
Sure.
So you would just throw money and brain power at this. I wasn't paying attention much then when I didn't exist much when this was really coming to fruition and they were building it. But like, I got to believe it was a blank check. Like, we need to do whatever we can do to win. Sort of like, a la Space Race. Like, we have to win this.
Well, famously, I think at one point, Northrop Grumman says, we realize it's not a blank check.
Yeah, I mean,
as they've gone way over budget repeatedly.
Yeah, and I think if you're running Northrop Grumman, you have to be cognizant of that. Otherwise, at some point, you're not going to exist past the next contract. Like, you're not going to get another one.
Right.
You also had to climb these mountains that didn't even exist yet. It was this sort of crazy time, much like I see a lot of similarities to the space program, where you just had to figure it out.
You have this audacious goal, and then you have to figure out how you're going to bring that to fruition.
We don't know how to do it, but we're pretty sure we know we can.
Yeah.
And I feel like that was probably the mindset there. So just to go back to your core question, really the answer was both. You had the advances in tech, and then you had to advance the tech further beyond that.
And so we made 100 of the B-1Bs.
Yes.
How many of these did we think we would want? And then how many were ultimately made? And then how many now are still in service?
Great question. So I think the initial procurement was like 130 of these. This is like around the mid 80s as this thing was becoming real. They later reduced that to about 75.
Why?
I don't know exactly why. I'm assuming as they figured out what you think about operational range. I'm not sure they knew that initially, right? They had a target. As that came to fruition, they may have been able to go, oh, this thing can go farther.
Yeah.
We don't need as many. Like, I don't know that to be factual, but I'm assuming it was things like that. As the plane became more apparent and what it could do, they could probably adjust the numbers accordingly.
And they were what? $2 billion each? How much were they to make?
Good question. Didn't know that yet. Because you were still kind of like, we're not sure what the target is.
Oh, okay.
But then you had this other sort of great thing for, I'd argue, for humanity, not great for the B-2 program, which was by the early 90s when the Soviet Union dissolved.
Sure.
The main goal of the Spirit, the B-2 Spirit, was these Cold War missions. They were gone.
Yeah.
The train is already on the tracks. It's already chugging.
Mr. Gorbachev became a pal.
Exactly. And so now you're like, oh, wait, do we still need these?
Yeah.
I would say in hindsight, 25 years later, 30 years later, looking back at this, it would not have been a wise decision to pull the plug on the thing.
Sure.
I don't think that would have been wise. But they did reduce it significantly. Under George H.W., they brought the production down to 20. So they said, okay, we're going to go from 130 that was initially postulated to 75 down to 20.
Yeah.
I don't know this next part to be factual, but I have to believe 20 was probably what the Air Force said. If you're not going to make at least 20, don't bother. Like, you can't make two.
Yeah.
You got to have a bunch because they're constantly in various rotations.
Because we have to train support staff. There's a lot to this.
You've got them in maintenance. Like, you're worrying about overhaul and keeping them maintained, and you want this thing to live some reasonable period of time. So we ended up making 20 in the mid mid-90s under Clinton, his administration authorized the prototype model to be converted from a prototype to an operational vehicle.
Okay.
So we ended up with 21. At the end of the day, we ended up with 21. In the mid-90s, Northrop did come back to the government and say, hey, we can do 20 more, at a reduced cost. I think it was like a blue light special. They're like, hey, we got all the tooling. We can still do this. We can do 20 cheaper. And the price they quoted then was a flyaway cost of $566 million each.
Shoot, you should buy hundreds, sure, at that price.
Get one for your friend. Why not? That was basically, I got to believe, their cogs. Like they got, plus a little bit of margin.
Sure.
They were already so deep in. They initially started this plan thinking they were going to make 130. I'm sure they made money on the design process, but I'm also sure they were planning on making margin on these things later. So when you go from 130 to 20,
right,
they're like, oh man, come on, let's make something. Yeah. We, the government, did not take them up on that. We put 21 into service. To my knowledge, to the world's knowledge, we've only lost 2 to date. So there are 19 that are still flying. 2.
Okay.
Yeah. We had one that was destroyed in 2008 in Guam. They had water intrusion on some sensors. It gave the flight control system bad information. It put the plane into a position that it could not fly, and it crashed. The pilots ejected. They lived.
Water is the enemy of this thing.
Water is the enemy of all electronics.
No, but this plane in particular has so many problems with water.
Yeah, we'll certainly come back to that. And then in 2010, ironically, there was another B-2 that crashed in Guam at Anderson Air Force Base in Guam. They spent months fixing it on the ground in Guam. Remember, this thing doesn't fly out of Guam. It's not its home airport. Uh-huh. They fixed it in Guam just good enough to fly it back to Northrop Grumman and repair it. It took 4 years and cost more than $100 million.
Wow.
To my knowledge, that one is still in service. Then in 2022, more recently, we had one that I think it started, I don't know if it actually left the runway, but it started to take off, didn't crash at the end of the runway. I believe the pilots ejected, they lived, but it literally shut down Whiteman for like a week. They grounded the fleet.
Oh, wow.
It was a bit of a mess. That one they could have fixed. The Air Force decided not to. I got to believe by that point, 2022, you're only planning on carrying that plane for another 8 to 10 years.
Right.
They just said, you know what? I think we can live without it. Yeah. Interesting. So of the sort of 19, they're not all available for combat at any given time. Typically, there's at least one in a long-term sort of depot for maintenance at Northrop. You've got 2 or 3 that are in some sort of heavy maintenance at Whiteman, which is their home air base in Missouri.
Okay.
And then there's usually up to 1 or 2 in flight testing at Edwards.
Oh, okay.
That is interesting because if you've ever been to like a game at the Rose Bowl or the Coliseum,
sure, of course,
when they do a flyover, a lot of times they'll bring a B-2. And I always made a very broad assumption that came out of Whiteman. And I'm like, man, that is a long way to fly.
Right.
But then they'd have the pilots back for like halftime. And I was like, oh, okay. They're flying out of Edwards.
They don't land at Whiteman.
Well, no, but
they're landing at Edwards.
Well, no, but I was assuming, because again, these things, they're a pain in the ass to maintain.
Sure.
I don't think a lot of air bases can support them. When I found this out, that there's usually a couple in flight testing at Edwards, that makes a lot of sense then. The one you're seeing at the Rose Bowl is the one that's based out of Edwards, not the one that's based out of Whiteman, is my hunch.
Sure.
I mean, when you are the Air Force, you can get places pretty quick.
Oh, for sure.
CHP has lights and sirens. They get there pretty fast. Kind of fast as you can by surface. But as soon as you get to the Air Force, like, those guys win.
So the Air Force did not want to repair this thing because it was too expensive to repair. And the previous one, they did repair, the one that had been in the water. This was before they figured out that if you get the plane wet, you can put it in rice and it should dry out okay.
Yeah, this was the Elon Musk Cybertruck. If it gets wet, you just put in a giant bag of rice.
And you're good.
No, to be clear, the 2008 one, they crashed. They did not repair. That one was decommissioned. The 2010 one crash in Guam, they repaired. The 2022 crash in Whiteman, they did not repair.
Yeah.
To my knowledge, they have not decided what to do with that airframe. My hunch is it'll end up on display somewhere.
Sure. Do these planes have tail numbers? I mean, I know Whiteman's like a specialty Air Force base. They don't need tail numbers because you know if somebody's going to take off or land. Do they have anything IDing them on the outside?
So they have tail numbers. They are located on the nose gear door.
Interesting.
Super interesting.
On the inside of the door, is it like where the tire pressure is on your car?
Bob, it says 35 PSI. My gauge is at home. What do we do here?
Real quick, I need you to explain Whiteman to me. Why Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri?
Oh, great question. So the middle of the country, I think that's probably the biggest factor is you can get to either side. Not that you're not going to be doing missions within the US, but if you have some adversary, you have some mission that's outside of the US, probably better to be in the middle. I think that also helps because you have, being more central in the US, you're farther away from the edges, obviously. Yeah. Probably a little safer place to be. This is why NORAD is a part of why NORAD is in the middle of the country.
Not because Missouri had like a super powerful senator who said, of course we can build the B-2. What part of Missouri would you like to keep it in?
Yeah, exactly. I'm assuming that's part of it as well. But I think there's also benefit in there being one site and not multiple sites because this is such an odd bird aircraft.
Yeah.
So that's why they went with a single site and not multiples, which we love to, generally speaking, as humans, we love to bash on the government for being inefficient, but that actually seems like a pretty efficient solution.
Sure.
But because these things are flying wings that are like something like 170 feet wide, they require these very unique structures to house them. They use these, they're called extra large deployable aircraft hangar systems. They're 200 feet wide, 400 feet long, and 60 feet high.
It's a serious building.
Which is nuts. And you can go look at the satellite photos as I do. You can see they've got something like 18 of these hangars at Whiteman. And the best part about doing that, looking at those satellite photos of Whiteman, is then you're almost guaranteed to get a visit from the FBI.
I'm sure.
So it's like, as I'm like Googling B-2 statistics and looking at this, they're going to just be like over at my house in no time.
So when you disappear for about 8 weeks, we'll all know where you went.
You'll all know where. But something else that's interesting, this isn't about Whiteman specifically, but about their storage facilities, is the coating on these things, whatever the radar absorbing mat that you and I were joking about being very susceptible to water damage. In order to maintain it, they have to keep it climate controlled.
So wild.
So the hangars that these are in have these very complex climate control systems, dust filtration, all of these things. And then also, by the way, you've got a giant door on the front of it.
Sure.
You got to get the plane out quickly. Like, I know you don't think about opening the door taking a long time, but the aircraft's almost 200 feet wide.
Right.
It's 60 feet tall. The hangar door is 60 feet tall.
You can't make the hangar door come up.
Yeah.
It has to roll to the side.
So one of their, their big, like, hey, we did a great job, is that the door can open in 10 minutes.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Like 10 minutes is considered a low time. I think that's a big part of why they put it in Whiteman.
Okay, hang on. I got just a few more questions.
Okay.
B-52 bomber. We always see these in movies, and they always have 100 soldiers getting in ready to jump out the back of them and paratrooper.
Yes.
How many people does the B-2 fit? And what are the roles of the people it does fit?
The answer is right in the name. 2. You can fit exactly 2 people inside a B-2. There's no other space.
A tiny little cockpit, that's
inside. It's a tiny little cockpit. The cockpit in the B-2 is the only part of the B-2 that is inhabitable, right? You've got a cockpit, and then everything else is basically functional.
So at no point can either of the 2 operators go back into where the bays are, the bomb bays.
To my knowledge, no.
They can't go out and if a bomb gets stuck and help give it a little push.
And just push it and then ride it down. I've seen that movie.
Sure.
It's a lot of fun. There are 2 seats in the cockpit. There's a little space behind them. They say, quote, it's large enough for an average sized man to lay down. Like, that could mean a lot of things.
Well, no, because some of these flights are 40 hours and more than that.
Yeah.
You would need one of you to be sleeping.
You got to rest. The handful of military pilots that I know that have now gone into commercial and fly commercial, they giggle at what they get to do, because you'll go do like a takeoff, you'll do 4 hours of flying, and then you have a bunk you get to go sleep on. Like, you have a bunk in the plane you get to go sleep on, and then another person takes over, and then you come back and you land the plane.
I like my pilots well rested.
Of course. On the B-2, you have 2 crew members in it, 2 seats. That's it.
What are their roles?
So they both are trained in all operations of the mission. The one that sits on the right is the mission commander. So they handle the weapons, the comms with the military. The one on the left is considered the pilot. And they're performing the, quote, lesser tasks of flying the airplane and dealing with air traffic control.
Interesting.
To be clear, they both can do all of the jobs, but that's usually the way they split them up. So you've got the mission commander on the right, you've got the pilot on the left.
Makes perfect sense. So basically 2 guys who are controlling this entire
2 people.
thing.
Yep.
Rick and Larry. The right and the left.
Yep.
Tell me what challenges that they face versus crews of other types of military aircraft. What are the unique challenges of the B-2?
As I mentioned earlier, you typically, not always, but you typically take off and land in Missouri, right, from Whiteman. So if your mission is, say, for example, in Iran, that takes you a hot minute to get to. So these missions can very typically be 30 hours plus.
Wow.
Humans still got to be humans during that time. Could you imagine if, like, you're the mission commander, you're 3 hours in on your flight, and your pilot's like, Larry, I got to pee. You're like, come on, man. We just got up in the air.
Now, seriously, pull over.
Yeah, pull over. Just land in Greenland. It'll be fine. So in the back of the cockpit, right behind this cockpit space, there's a toilet, there's a microwave. They typically will bring a couple styrofoam coolers containing food that the pilots get to pack for themselves, which I think is fantastic.
Interesting.
Because Larry's bringing like fish. He's just bringing in like white fish.
Smelling up the whole cockpit.
Exactly. And he's like, well, it wasn't mine. They're like, come on, dude, there's 2 of us. And then there's typically, I mentioned earlier, there's like enough room for the quote average sized man to lay down. For long missions, and I thought this was kind of fascinating that the crew gets to pick, apparently. Yeah. They'll bring a cot or like a camping pad or something. Apparently that is not standard issue. That did not seem to be considered when they designed this plane. Like,
kind of seems important.
It feels a little rushed. Like, this plane feels like when they designed it, they were just like, oh, I should go over and bomb stuff. And they're like, oh, okay, are we going to land in between for fuel, for refreshments? Like, what are we going to do? So they don't have a lot. I mean, it feels a lot like camping to me. It does feel like camping at 40,000 feet.
In the cockpit.
Yeah.
Camping in very cramped quarters.
Very cramped quarters. Yeah. I've read stories of folks, the crew, getting up and, taking turns, obviously getting up, and someone will go in the back and kind of stretch. They will take a shower with like wet naps, like wet.
Oh, yeah,
towels.
sure.
I read this in 2 separate accounts where they will commonly do their hair. Apparently that helps them feel a little more refreshed, which I can totally appreciate.
Oh, my word.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, because you just have to reset. There also have been multiple references to what they call government-issued, quote, go pills.
What's that?
I don't know what it is. I'm assuming it's some sort of,
speed.
caffeine plus. Yeah, some sort of speed that they can take for small doses to keep them awake and going. Ugh. I'd call all of those decent-sized challenges. And because you can mid-air refuel, which, by the way, they are known to do under missions in complete darkness.
Wow.
No lights on the plane, no lights on the refueling plane, and they've got to fly in behind a KC-135 or KC-10 underneath it and connect to this boom to refuel. Yeah. Let me just remind everybody, you have no vertical stabilizer. So if you hit a crosswind, it's extremely bad.
Oh, sure.
Don't mind all the kerosene they're pumping into your fuel tanks.
So we're thinking of actually sunsetting this thing.
Yeah.
We are about 5 years away from sunsetting this and replacing it.
Yes.
What will its replacement be?
So the B-2 will be replaced by the B-21 Raider. So the B-21 Raider, that's in development now. I suspect we're going to see these things being delivered, I think, in the early 2030s. It actually seems like that program is going fairly smoothly. They didn't have, I think, the time pressure that you had with the B-2. They also, this sounds really silly to say this way, but I think they are designing for affordability in mind. I think they've learned their lesson.
It's amazing.
On the B-2, yeah.
Sure.
Let's see where the rubber meets the road. I'm cautiously optimistic, let's just say. But so a lot of standardization and modularity. Also, they solved a lot of the hard problems of the B-2 and got to learn from it. So you'd expect the next one to be a lot better.
Of course.
But similar sort of
best iPhone yet.
Well, exactly. Radar absorbing coatings, right? Hopefully it'll be a little more durable in rain. So sort of, next gen stealth. We've had 40 years of development really between when we were designing the B-2 and designing the B-21. So certainly a lot has happened. Yeah. And I suspect it'll be a much better platform.
Still haven't mastered the numbering.
Well, I like this because it's the B-2 version.
Rev 1? I don't think so.
Yeah.
But okay.
So it makes sense. If you Rev 0, that was the beta. And then this is the 2.1-ish. Also, remember the B-2 was done in a hell of a lot of secrecy, right? The B-2, the GAO, right, was the General Accounting Office, basically the accountants for the government. Yeah. They didn't even know about the B-2 program for like a decade.
Oh, wow.
It was buried somewhere. You can say, well, government hiding it from the accountability. It's like, well, no, we were in a race against Russia. Yeah. So the less people that know, the better. I didn't know this until thinking about this segment, but the U.S. government bought an old Ford assembly plant in Pico Rivera in Southern California, put everybody on, I think, secret or top secret clearance to start building some of the parts leading up to the B-2. Nobody even knew about it. When military, the Air Force would go there to check on it, they'd wear civilian clothes.
Oh, wow.
So much effort that went into trying to hide it. It was pretty impressive. Now, of course, several people have gone to prison for quite some time for trying to sell some of these secrets to our enemies. We've caught some of them. I presume because we've caught some of them, we haven't caught some of them. So I presume some,
sure.
When you look at the China vaporware plane, you're like, wow, looks a lot like a B-2. I don't think they just drew that off the internet. I got to believe they got some part of something somewhere. But I am optimistic about the B-21 Raider. I think it will actually be a much better platform and better plane.
Well, it should be. It gets to stand on the shoulders of the B-2. Yeah, it's the best iPhone.
It's our best iPhone yet. Yeah. They also suspect that the cost, while not quote cheap, will be much better than the B-2. I have that number somewhere. So is the B-21 the iPhone 16 Pro Max with 2 terabytes of storage?
I think it is.
Or is it the iPhone SE? My hunch is it's probably more in the middle, maybe middle plus than the upper extreme. I don't know enough about the design criteria to know, but it seems like they're not trying to bend as many, laws of physics as we did with the B-2.
Sure.
It seems like it's more like an incremental.
You're not pushing quite as much on the cutting edge.
So I'm optimistic about it. They're not trying to do anything too asinine. I also think, generally speaking, as a design goal with the B-21, they've said, hey, we got a lot of other stuff in the fleet. Let's be a little more specific and not try to make the one plane that can do everything.
Sure.
And that's probably where they're going to get the biggest cost savings. That can probably cut your price more than in half by just being more specific with what it can do.
All right, enough about planes you can't see or hear. We have to get out of here, but quickly before we do, have you seen or read anything good this last week?
So you want me to pick something that you can see and hear? Is that what you're saying?
Ideally, sure.
Look, we're just an episode about aviation we haven't done in a while. So I feel like I really have to recommend the 2 best aviation films of all time.
2?
Do you know what they are?
Okay. I do, but yes.
You do?
I do.
Okay. The first one, tell me this makes your list.
I know you well.
My first one is 1983's The Right Stuff.
Sure.
Is that on your list? Top aviation films?
Of course.
So this is, for folks that haven't seen it, I'm assuming a lot of our listeners probably have. This sort of details the space program's development from breaking the sound barrier in the 1940s all the way through like Mercury 7 astronaut selection a decade later, and really just talking about the cowboys that were these test pilots that literally risked their lives on what I will call not well proven tech, and the engineers that were like, please don't do that. Please don't.
Right.
And the pilot's just like, just going for it. Great film. But of course, that film I think was so good because they got to stand on the shoulders of giants of the best aviation film ever made, which was released several years before. What would that be?
Well, you're going to say Airplane.
I'm going to say Airplane because
it's really good.
It's really good. And I can't imagine anybody listening to this right now hasn't seen Airplane. If you haven't, please stop listening to the show right now and go watch Airplane because it is a fantastic film. And really, for the 3 people listening that don't know, the premise is simple. After the crew becomes sick with food poisoning, a neurotic ex-fighter pilot must safely land a commercial airplane full of passengers.
Sure.
That's it. Super easy. The story that comes out of that is fantastic. So
delightful.
The Right Stuff and Airplane available today on VHS and Laserdisc at a Blockbuster near you.
Of course it is.
How about you? What have you seen?
Since tomorrow is the 4th of July, I figured it was a perfect time to recommend my favorite 4th of July movie, 1990's Avalon. The story is simple. An immigrant family comes to the U.S. at the beginning of the 20th century. They and their children try to make themselves a better future in the so-called Promised Land. Great acting, great writing, and an amazing score by Randy Newman. Ooh. As the great-grandson of immigrants, this movie kills me. I've seen it many times, and yet every time, 10 minutes in, I'm a complete mess. Avalon on Amazon Prime now.
I have not seen this film. I feel like I need to go watch it. This sounds pretty interesting.
It's really good, and it starts out with the 4th of July and the fireworks. It's a great 4th of July.
That's amazing.
Watch.
Sounds awesome. I'll check that out.
That is the episode.
Thank you for joining us for all this nonsense. Truly terrible podcast about aviation from The Awful Company. Visit us on the web at nonsense.productions. I'm Stu.
I'm Jeff Parker.
If you like this program, please follow, download, subscribe, and like at Apple Podcasts, YouTube Music, Amazon Music, AntennaPod, iHeartRadio, Spotify, my favorite Overcast, or wherever you may get your podcasts from.
Nonsense Studios are automated by Home Assistant, open source home automation that puts local control and privacy first and is powered by a worldwide community of tinkerers and DIY enthusiasts. Forget Alexa, HomeKit, SmartThings, and Google Assistant. Those are children's toys compared to Home Assistant.
I love us plugging the open software. We'll be here every Tuesday and Thursday morning for more nonsense. Please join us.
They couldn't have anticipated this B-2 would ever have to fly under rain. And it was built in California where it never rains.
It never rains.
It probably just never came up.
How'd you let the guys at Boeing do it up in Seattle? That thing would have been a submarine.
Right. It would have been watertight.
Yeah, totally.
They would have never made the outside skin out of rice paper.
They would have just added to it. They would have been like, hey, it's an airplane. It also doubles as a submarine. Like, we didn't ask for that. They're like, yeah, we know, but it's Seattle.
Yeah, but it does. It does.
It's just what we do.